Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, depending on which part of the world you are from. Welcome to this program. I wanted to discuss today the COPAC 27 Climate Change Summit in Egypt. Yes, our President Emmerson Mnangagwa from Zimbabwe, he is attending the summit. He could be seen there in the photograph on the far um, left-hand side. He is no wonder when he gets the opportunity to speak, he will no wonder complain about the sanctions and how the sanctions are stopping Zimbabwe from addressing the various challenges brought about by uh, climate change. And he will no doubt be once again be calling for the sanctions to be lifted. This has become a familiar tune to most of us. Um, at every opportunity, he has seized on that opportunity to speak about sanctions and that they should be lifted. In this case, there will be no exception. The president will no doubt be accompanied by the usual high-powered delegation, as is often is to such occasions. COPAC to the UN stands for Conference of Parties, the 27th Conference of Parties. To the most of the third world countries, including our president, I think it stands for an opportunity for them to literally nag the rest of the developed world to give aid to countries like Zimbabwe to help them cope with the challenges of the climate change. This has been the norm. COP26 in Glasgow, the developing countries were putting a lot of pressure on the developed countries to help them cope with the climate changes, and for good reason too. I mean, the most of the climate changes, of course, were caused not by the developing countries, but by the developed countries who have been using fossil fuels to accelerate their development, which have been producing the um, the gases that are causing the temperature to rise. So that point is taken. But the point, as the third world countries and most third world countries would note, is that countries like Zimbabwe have been known for being wasteful. I think this has given the third world, the developing countries, the excuse for not really stepping forward and giving the promised financial assistance to the third world countries. First of all, to cope with the changes caused by climate change. We've seen a lot of floods, high temperatures, drought, all those things are caused by climate change. And those nations that live along the coastlines, they've seen the water levels rise, and the storms are more severe than ever before, causing a lot of damage. And, and these things cost money. I mean, when you're talking of a country like Pakistan, a third of it is under flood. That's when you realize how serious this problem is. But the problem with third world countries is that they get the aid and they don't use it properly. And I think this has given the developing countries the excuse for not giving that financial assistance that they had committed to give to first world countries to help cope with the climate changes, and also to for them to be able to stop using fossil fuel and go to the greener energy, hydro, solar, and wind power whenever they can. And in a country like Zimbabwe has suffered. During the COVID, Zimbabwe is one of the few third world countries that received the least amount of financial assistance compared to other countries, simply because those developing countries felt that Zimbabwe, because of its reputation as being corrupt and wasteful, would not use the funds properly. And this is no secret. The last Minister of Health, Obadiah Moyo, was sacked because stories had come out that something like US $60 million of COVID-19 funds had been abused. And when you've got a reputation like that, who would want to give you aid when they know the chances are that money will disappear into, will be wasted one way or the other? That is the problem that we have in third world countries, and we've got to admit it, and we've got to face it. The seriousness of COVID, of the climate change, cannot be denied. And I just want to open a video where the Secretary General is explaining the seriousness of our problem.
In just days, our planet's population will cross a new threshold. The 8 billionth member of our human family will be born. This milestone puts into perspective what this climate conference is all about. How will we answer when baby 8 billion is old enough to ask, what did you do for our world and for our planet when you had the chance? Excellencies, this UN climate conference is a reminder that the answer is in our hands. And the clock is ticking. We are in the fight of our lives, and we are losing. Greenhouse gas emissions keep growing. Global temperatures keep rising. And our planet is fast approaching tipping points that will make climate chaos irreversible. We are on a highway to climate hell, with our foot still on the accelerator.
That's right. We are in serious trouble, and we have put our foot on the accelerator. Whether we like it or not, we in third world countries, we will pay for climate change. The problems of drought, flooding, when they're okay all over the world, including third world countries. We may not have contributed much to the temperature rise, but we will still pay. And whenever there are problems like this, it's like what somebody once said, that when the developed world catch flu, those in the developing world will be coughing blood or worse. So it is in our interests, those of us in the developing countries, to really make sure that something is done about climate change. But our first priority in a country like Zimbabwe is that we get the help, as much help as we can get from the international world. At the present moment, we are not getting it for the simple reason that we have got a regime that is incredibly corrupt, incompetent, and have stayed in power for all these years, not because they were doing anything useful for the country, but because they were able to rig elections and stay in power. And this is the problem that we must address. Our greatest contribution, in my view, to climate change, or at least to helping ourselves cope with climate change, is making sure that Zimbabwe has got good governance, that we finally cure ourselves of this case of rigged elections and bad governance. Because as long as that remains the problem, even those countries that genuinely want to help us will not be able to help us. We know there have been many cases of donated funds being abused and being wasted. Zimbabwe has got the wealth to do a lot of things for itself. That point has been said and has been established convincingly. The only reason why we've not been able to do it is because of 42 years of bad governance. And as we face the future has become even more uncertain than ever before. The climate change challenges are only putting a layer on top of the challenges that we're facing. Right now in Zimbabwe, we are still in the middle of the COVID-19. The country has not really solved it, although in the developed countries, they've now got vaccines and they are now on to administering the second or third booster jab to their citizens. Whereas in Zimbabwe, I think it's no exaggeration that probably most people have not received their second, if at all they've received their first. So that is where we are. And if you're going to put on layers of climate change challenges, drought, flooding, heat waves, and so forth, this will increase the problems in the country. And even those countries that would want to help, if they find they give the aid and the aid is wasted, they are not going to keep on helping. There are other nations that deserve help and they will use it properly. So it is imperative, It is absolutely important for us Zimbabweans to really um, bite the bullet and deal with this problem of bad governance, of rigged elections. We are not going to get out of this mess without that fight. While the world is dealing with the problem of climate change and the challenges that it brings, our problem still remains that of how to have a, a competent government that is accountable to the people. Because without that, I don't think there will be any meaningful change in Zimbabwe. We'll be just going round and round in circles. And of course, people like President Mnangagwa will be continuing with their globe-trotting, attending all these conferences for no other reason than a photo opportunity. That is the reality that we have got to deal with as a nation. We cannot pretend Mnangagwa is at COP27 and will contribute anything other than just another photo opportunity for himself and his high-powered delegation. They are not solving anything for Zimbabwe. We'll be going into an election next year, and already there's overwhelming evidence that those elections are going to be rigged. And another 5 years of this regime is unthinkable. But unless we stand up and say, no, we want free, fair, and credible elections, this regime will be in power after next year's elections, after next year's rigged elections. Food for thought. Thank you and good night.